programme, we visit Elmley Infants in Bristol to see how the leadership team maintains the professional standards of the school staff. Head teacher Inga Fay sees the school as a learning environment not only for pupils but for staff as well.
By having other people watching in the classrooms, children are aware that we as teachers are learning alongside them. Last year we set up some coaching partnerships so that a teacher would work alongside another teacher and share expertise and ask each other questions. And this year we're going to work in groups of 3, triads we've called them.
Learning support assistant Karen Geddes runs Right Dance workshops with younger pupils. Right Dance introduces young children to the basic shapes used in handwriting through music and movement. Today, some of the other LSAs have joined her group to learn how to run their own workshops.
We're going to be big, strong robots, and we're going to fill this whole hall with straight robot lines. Do you think you can do that? Yeah. Right. Off we go. Great big movements. In a school like this, there isn't a huge amount of money for sending us on courses and stuff, so we tend to pool all our resources as people, and we tend to train each other. Go for it! Big movement! I've led sessions for teachers only, I've led sessions for LSAs only, just so they understand what Right Dance is all about and see how they can use it within everyday work in the classroom. What? Keep going! Stand still. Right, with your eyes closed now, and without the music, I want you to remember all those shapes that you were making when you were a robot. It started as something I was doing in a small group with children with special needs, children that found mark making quite difficult on paper. I want you just to draw some of those shapes that you made. They're only quite small movements. Can you all turn around so you can see? Brilliant. Pop your bottoms on the floor. And then with the music, we're going to do some lines. Some big lines either side.
It's a fun session, but learning support assistants Janet Porteous and Elizabeth Webster want to know how dance leads to better handwriting.
It originally starts on a big piece of paper, so the children get used to making these straight line shapes. And then as the weeks progress and you repeat the programme over and over again, you have your paper smaller, so the lines become smaller. And then you can relate those shapes back into everyday writing. Our next job is to draw some mountains.
As the trainer for this session, what does Karen need to convey to her colleagues?
I think the important thing is the process. It's learning, it's understanding the music, it's understanding what you want the child to achieve and how best to help them achieve that. Change direction!
I've got to run a session with some Year 1 children introducing this. How would you recommend that I start going about it?
I'd recommend maybe you did circles and eights as one of the first pieces because it's lovely music. Right. It leads the children beautifully into making the right shapes. Luke, can you stand up with your piece of paper? Luke thought of lots and lots of letters that had those straight line robot shapes in them. Tell me one of your letters you found, Luke. Yeah. How many straight lines did it have?
3.
3 straight lines in one letter. That is amazing, Luke. Well done. Today, some of the children were able to say, oh, this is a word. A word has straight shapes. So it's something just to help them trigger their memories and trigger the shape making when it comes to writing, really. Saoirse, what letters did you find that had straight lines in? And how many lines has it got?
3.
3 straight robot lines.
When you get them back from the session in the hall, back to the classroom, you then can remind them, of the music and the movements they made.
Absolutely.
To help them in their writing on pencil and paper.
Absolutely, yeah. And the children just seem to enjoy it, and it's a lovely way to learn to write, isn't it?
Hopefully they will develop and become more confident in their learning, won't they? Mm.
To help maintain professional standards within the school, head teacher Inga Fay has developed a self-assessment system to identify and share the existing skills of her staff.
There's so much expertise in this school that needs to be celebrated. It's not always about going out and finding a course or buying a provider. It's about what's actually living and breathing in your school.
Karen began leading right dance classes after the one-to-one sessions she was running were picked up through her self-assessment.
I was observed by my line manager. She hadn't seen right dance before. We talked about where right dance programme could go within the school. Together we worked out a sort of timetable as to how we would introduce it and who would find it beneficial. And they're all written down here and noted and then reviewed every 6 months.
The leadership team have recently collected the staff self-assessment forms for review. Deputy Head Carol Bowes is new to the school, so colleagues Claire Clahosey and Margaret Gilligan take her through the review process.
Yes, this one's lovely. In what ways are you a better member of staff than you were this time last year? So that kind of makes you think. You have to actually kind of look back on the whole year and think how far you've come, what your journey was this year, and actually that's very useful to do, isn't it?
Yeah, it's really good for your own self-esteem, I think, and particularly at the end of the year you feel really fired up by it.
Yeah.
As part of the self-assessment, staff are asked to think about training they've completed.
It's asking you to explain how it's impacted on both your professional development and the learning of the pupils in your class.
The feedback's then collated into a table.
We can then see at a glance the training needs for everybody in the school, so that we can set things up, because quite often several people have identified a similar training need.
So would it then be the senior leadership team who would look at appropriate courses run by the county to back these training needs, or would it be that you looked for expertise within the school to give the training?
It's a bit of both, really, isn't it?
Yes, I mean, sometimes a few people identify the same sort of thing, and maybe we may have an inset day on that, or it could be somebody in the school who would help to work with that person. They could go in and observe and share ideas and maybe develop a coaching partnership with.
This is my personal statement that I've written, and obviously with me not being here very long, I just wanted to go through it and say, this is the type of thing that you would write down in that statement. I'd like to learn a bit more about phonics, because it's been a while since I've been in Key Stage 1 teaching, and I know from coming into the school that you do a lot of the philosophy work, and I'd like to learn a bit more about that.
That's great. Actually, Claire could help you with that.
Yes, we're doing philosophy sessions in the classroom, so if you'd like to come in and see them sometime, I'm sure we could arrange for some cover and you could come in and watch.
It's the following week. Carol and fellow class teacher Janet Williams have joined Claire's class to observe one of her philosophy lessons. With infant pupils, philosophy lessons introduce the basics of discussion, teaching speaking and listening skills and how to phrase questions. The subject of this week's discussion is the story of the Gruffalo.
A mouse took a stroll through a deep, dark wood. A fox saw the mouse and the mouse looked good.
In the book, a canny mouse tells imaginary tales of his monstrous friend the Gruffalo to scare off other animals threatening to eat him. The plan works until the imaginary Gruffalo appears in the flesh.
The children decided which question we would discuss. They voted for the question which they thought would be the most interesting one.
The question with the most votes was... Lucy, do you think you could read it for me?
Why was the mouse telling lies? Otherwise he might have got eaten by the fox, the snake or the owl. Well, I think it was sort of the right and wrong.
Right and wrong. That's interesting, isn't it? That's a very, very good point.
I noted that some of the children agreed and disagreed with each other. How do you deal with that?
We did start off at the beginning saying that there are questions that don't have answers, and therefore we would have a different opinion. That's all right to have your own opinion. You can agree or disagree as long as you do it politely.
I think the mouse told a lie for his own safety. I do.
And that was to protect himself. I wonder what you think. Do you think that was right or do you think that was wrong?
I think it would be okay, because otherwise he would have got eaten, and then that would have been the end of his life.
The pupils are deep in discussion, but how does observing this help the staff in their training?
We have coaching triads where 3 teachers will work together and have professional discussions about what they notice in the classrooms, which has worked really well. At the beginning, when they first start doing philosophy, I think they tend to make statements rather than asking questions. They'll see things they've observed in the story, but they won't necessarily understand how to formulate a question. So, what did you think of the mouse telling that lie?
Because he could have got into trouble.
He could have got into trouble.
Discussions like this are quite a challenge for young minds.
Often the children who are quite reserved in a whole class situation suddenly have very definite opinions in a philosophy discussion.
I don't think it's fair because if the mouse was telling lies, he could have got into trouble.
So if I was going to start doing this tomorrow with my class, what do I need to plan to do tonight so that I can walk in tomorrow and know that I'm going to start off on the right foot?
Well, I think first of all, you have to talk to the children about what philosophy is and what philosophers do, and lay ground rules. We talked a lot about how you feel if people aren't listening to you, how you feel when they are listening to you, and how people show that they're listening.
The mouse could have just told lies just so they wouldn't have eaten him, and then he just lied about him being the scariest creature in the wood.
So once you've set them into the circle and you've set up the ground rules of, waiting for each other, how do they then continue the discussions?
Because I want them to pass over the discussion to somebody else and for it not to be led by me, I ask the children to hold their hand out. Can you choose someone, Molly? They decided themselves that it would be a good idea if they didn't put their hand out until the person who was talking had finished, and that would really show that you were listening to somebody.
I think that the learning point for me as a teacher was that you've got to let them go at their own pace. It's very tempting, enriching there, sitting beside saying, well, is it right ever to tell a lie? But, that isn't really what you want to lead with. And it was lovely to see them taking their time, going round, exploring it at their level.
There are lots of benefits of working with other teachers in the classroom with you. Their comments and suggestions are very helpful, and you learn every time. I think actually with philosophy you learn from the children every time because they come up with such amazing ideas.
But how did he know if he was going to get eaten or not?
That's a really good point. That's a really good point because we don't actually know if he would have been eaten or not, do we?
I think it's very important for people to share their own skills and their abilities. We're all learning all the time. We learn from the children and we learn from each other. And it's just an ongoing process, and it makes a difference to us every day when we're learning something.